So just want to welcome back everyone or anyone that is new, and just want to just recap and reintroduce myself. Again, my name is Chantal Dubuisson-Myllymaki, and I am co-founder of Threshold. I'm a certified parent educator. I have a master's in clinical psychology and a doctorate in education. Professionally, I've been serving the San Francisco Bay Area community for over 25 years as a counselor, but mainly as a teacher and educator, to which I love. And I love working with people who care for children. So on a personal note, I am first generation American born of two Caribbean parents, and I am the proud parent of two adult children and a proud grandparent of two grandchildren. So again, it's wonderful to be here with you. So today's training is the second part of the series on child development that we started last week. So if any of you were unable to come last week, I understand that you'll be able to watch the recording on Alameda County's First Five YouTube channel. And if you have any questions about anything from that session, feel free to ask when you join next week's final session, session 3. So for this week, we're going to review some of the home exercises that you might have had a chance to do, to consider, or if you had any success in what we talked about. We're going to also talk about a few words about culture and parenting, and then continue looking at the stages of development through Erickson's psychosocial lens. And then talk about, as part of that lens, the importance of attachment, especially that occurs during infancy, but is something that is so important throughout child development and even into adulthood. We'll talk about early childhood. And then for questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free, like last time, to ask throughout our time together. You're not interrupting me, but know that we will end a little bit early. I'm planning to, so that you can have any final questions, comments, or feedback that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask during our time together. And as was mentioned by Catherine, there's going to be an assessment after our time together. And then please look out for handouts and a copy of this PowerPoint after our time. And our ending is at 3. Okay. So some learning objectives to keep in mind. So to be able to recognize 1 or 2 milestones for each stage of development that we're going to explore. And also identify 1 or 2 strategies to help children reach each stage of development that we can do. And as mentioned during some of the, to piggyback on what was mentioned earlier, just being respectful of one another, right? So we come to the training with maybe some knowledge. So what we might encounter might be something we know, so it might be validating. Keeping in mind, again, that it's a chance to really look at maybe someone else's perspective. If someone shares something that maybe you didn't hear of before, didn't consider, it could be a chance to really get someone else's perspective. Cell phones, right? Put them on vibrate, silence, and you might want to check them now because, again, it's going to ring when you don't expect it. So making sure it's on vibrate or silent. And we talked about confidentiality last time, and I was reminded that these sessions are recorded, right? So thinking about confidentiality, if someone shares something personal, know that yes, it's being recorded on YouTube, but also think about how you might want to share information that might be disclosed, even though it's recorded, and thinking about being respectful if someone does share something personal, where you might share it, maybe not at the grocery store, but just thinking about respecting someone's privacy, even though it's recorded. And then just like last time, having an equal voice for all participants, and typing in the chat is a nice way to really make sure that each person can be heard if we notice on the chat. But if you're not comfortable with chat, please raise your hand or just say it out loud, and we'll try to honor who might go first in case people talk at the same time. So from last time and from this time that we go over the rules or agreements, is there anything that needs to be added to these agreements to help you feel safer within our time together? Okay. So again, if anything comes to mind, just let me know. All right, it's okay. It's not your last chance. Even if something comes to mind the next session, it's okay. Okay, just let me know. And like Catherine was saying, oh, someone has their hand up. Hi.
I think Orlando has his hand up.
Hi, Orlando.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to do a reminder every 21 to 26 minutes, try to get up and stretch so your back won't have back problems or nothing like that.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's something I need to remember to self-care myself. I tend to just plow through. Thank you, thank you. So maybe you could remind me, because sometimes when I get to teaching, boy, I just get so excited. So thank you. So remind, please stretch. And definitely, we're going to have a break. I'll try to get it mid point. Please take advantage to stretch at that time. Okay, thank you for the reminder, Orlando. And let me see. So you could put your hand down, and thanks for the thumbs up. Thank you. Anybody else feel comfortable sharing an idea or something to add to the guidelines?
Hi, this is Vina. Maybe along with that piece, just taking a deep breath whenever we need to, because it's a lot of information to take in. And as we talk about child development, it brings up a lot of stories in our heads about the work we do. So I just thought I would share that as well.
Thank you, thank you. And we are definitely going to be doing a grounding activity after we do our check-in. And that's a reminder, taking a stretch and a breath can be beautiful. Thank you. Anything else? Those are some great ideas. Oh, hi there, little one. All right, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. So again, making this setting a place where we all feel safe, and especially taking care of ourselves. Okay, so for home practice, we talked about give you an invitation to observe the children in your lives based on the information that we shared last week. So we talked about the 4 areas of child development: cognitive, social emotional, motor, language. We also talked about aspects of brain development. And with each areas of development and brain development, what we can do, what we already do, or what we could consider doing in the lives of the children around us to enhance development and brain development. And then we also did an overview of Erickson's model. So if anyone feels comfortable expressing, did you notice something that you did to support the development or brain development and both of children in your life? Someone said, oh, some people write so fast. I was always interested in developmental differences with infants who have been drug exposed. This past week, I observed an infant on his back at the beginning of nap time, who occasionally would startle and quickly return to a calm posture. Some staff thought this was par for the course with drug-exposed infants. I do not see the same behavior in my mother-child sessions when the child is fully awake. In the past, I've experienced preschool age children awakening during nap time with distress and calling for a mother who was not present. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're talked about child development. So observing what might be going on with the children in your life. And that's a beautiful observation to maybe consider if this child is someone that you work with their parents, maybe just considering what is their take of what's going on, what does their primary care physician say, and following your instinct of observation, like, I never observed this. I wonder what this might mean. It could be a way to really support the infant in something that might have gone unnoticed if you didn't notice that. So thank you. This could be a way to really care and support this child. That's beautiful. Someone else wrote, how about doing at the beginning the relaxing music with breathing exercises? Mm-hmm. That's a really good idea too. After we do our check-in, though, we're going to do a grounding exercise. That's okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other check-ins? Someone else wrote, I read that research found that parents who talk to their baby a lot help build their vocabulary, and it helps them to be more successful later in life. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's something that we talked about. So really bringing in as many senses with our children as possible. So with talking, you're seeing your parent or caregiver express themselves, hearing the words, maybe holding them, feeling the warmth or maybe the intonations when they talk, right? Even when they're breathing, you inhaling, smelling your parent, so many senses are involved, touching. So again, when we talk to our children, maybe even though they might not talk back yet, that is building not only brain development, right? So connecting those synapses that we were talking about, how babies are born with neurons, billions of neurons, but they're not all connected through synapses. And when we interact with the children in our life, with babies, we help connect those synapses by talking, touching, reading to them, singing to them, exposing them to all kinds of experiences. That helps connect synapses. And even letting your child know what you're doing, right? So narrating, I'm washing the dishes, right? Boy, these dishes, it's hard to scrub this food off of here, right? Or just explaining what you're doing, right? So I remember, as I mentioned, I'm a parent. My oldest son now is 24. and he's the father of the 2 grandchildren. But I remember when he was a child in my arms, when we were taking the BART, right? So he was probably, I would say maybe 6 months, and talking to him about, wow, we're on this platform, it's pretty breezy, and that train is going to come that way, I think. And we have to stay at a safe distance, and we're going to go into the door, and that's where the door is going to land, by that yellow area. And just really talking to him about what's going on. And he was just listening, right? And so that all can help build vocabulary. And I must say, his vocabulary is pretty nice now. So thank you. Any other check-ins? Those are fantastic. Okay. So again, if anything else comes to mind, please let me know. But let's do a grounding activity. So what I'd like us to do is, this activity involves our senses. And just like we mentioned with child development, brain development in particular, it's important to involve as many senses as possible to help connect those synapses, right? So within the neurons. So for this activity, you always have a right to pass. But if you like, I'd like you to first think about, right, reflect on how you're feeling now before this activity. And then I'm going to ask you to reflect how you feel after. Okay, so checking in with yourself now. Oh, someone wrote a message. Thanks, Chantal. Just to clarify, I did talk to the mother, okay, who has not seen that same behavior. I am responsible for completing a CANS and do not want to assume that behavior is due to drug exposure, when there might be environmental explanation, child awakening to absence of mother versus the extended neurological response to not neonatal drug withdrawal. My professional orientation bias leads me to look for environmental resource influences also. Yes, thank you for clarifying, but also just thinking what you might know to keep all into consideration, right? So not jumping to conclusions, but like you were saying, this is something that I know about, so you can keep that in mind. But I like that you're thinking about other reasons also. But again, we can hold what we know and keep in mind, and maybe check and see what else might be going on. Okay, so that we can hold the child's holistic health in mind. But thank you for clarifying. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you. See a head nod. Thank you.
Well, yes, but
Mhm.
we're all we all answer to somebody else, and I'm expected to produce a CANS, and
Oh,
I'm expected to produce a thoughtful diagnosis and completed assessment. So I can't I can't observe this child over a period of months.
oh, okay. Okay.
And so what I was stunned by was that I had not seen this behavior before, whereas other staff who've seen children with maybe more severe withdrawal issues doing this all the time. And so yeah, so that's why I asked the question. Sometimes what we know about children's development is doesn't explain all the neurophysiological possibilities.
Right, right. Thank you, but
Yeah,
I'm glad.
there are two other professionals I can check with, but I just haven't done that yet.
Yes, but thank you. But raising your awareness, which I hope people walked away with last week, of what you're observing, right? So again, we're talking about child development in general, but raising your awareness to what you're observing. And again, I like that you also said checking it out, right? So not jumping to conclusions, holding what you're observing and checking it out with somebody else to confer. That's beautiful. Mhm. So, that alerts me to life experience over common education. Yeah, so holding a balance of both, right? Thank you, Orlando. Yeah, so we know what we know, but we also have life experience. So, surrounding ourselves with also some good counsel, right? Who can we talk this through with? Who's good counsel, right? So that's something to you might be part of that good counsel to the parents and caregivers in your caseload. And who do you have to support and to give you some ideas if you might notice something, right? So again, building that. Thank you. Thank you. I really like that. That was I like that check-in. That was something great to keep in mind.
And I think there's some comments in the chat.
I think I don't see any new ones. I think Orlando said life experience over common education. Am I missing someone?
Okay.
I don't see anything else, but thank you. Thank you. So let's come into the space again. And this is a mindfulness activity. And this is something that I love because it kind of piggybacks on using our senses. And mindfulness is a way, there's probably a lot of different ways to think about mindfulness. But what I like to think about mindfulness is being grounded in the present moment. Sometimes we might think about the past, if only this happened, if only this went this way, or we might think about the future. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong, let's say? The past we can learn from, but we can't change it. The future we could prepare for, but it might not even go that way. Mindfulness can remind us to be more and more in the present moment. In this moment, we can make a difference. We can notice what's going on. We can be more aware and make some changes. So this activity is something that I'm going to ask you, if you choose to participate, to attune to your senses. Ashe, thank you. I love the feedback. It's beautiful. To attune into your senses, okay? And let's start, and again, reflect on how you feel. And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you to check again to see if maybe there's a difference, right? So let's attune into our sense of sight. So I'm going to ask you to look around and notice a particular color. What do you see that might be the color red? Now, this is something we usually do in your mind, but since we're doing it together, you could say it out loud or type it in the chat. So what do you see? Slowly looking around. What do you see that's red? I'm looking at a red pen. What do you see? Red wreaths with apples, orange emergency kit, red shawl in the bag, red bends. Someone said a blue door. That's the next color we're gonna do. I was gonna ask for the next color. I'm gonna say the next color. Oh, before we go into blue, let me just read some of the other red. Red desk lamp, Santa Claus on the teacher's table, ketchup, red and orange flower, red sunglasses, red flower, red. Woo, there's a lot of red. Picked a winner. So now again, let's look around, and someone said blue. So now let's look around. What do we see that's blue? So just slowly look around. Tune to your sense of sight. I'm looking at my blue mouse. See what other blue. Pete the cat. Okay. Morton salt bottle, blue truck, blue silk scarf. There's a lot of blue. Okay, let me do this real fast. Blue and yellow flag for the Ukraine. Oh, blue airplane. Blue babies wearing blue. Blue hot pot. My niece is painting with blue sky and a bunny. Okay, thank you. Okay. So no more sight. So again, there's a lot. We picked some 2 great colors. Now I'm going to ask you to attune to your sense of sound. What do you hear? I could hear silence, which is amazing for me. Oh, people are hearing a lot. Someone else said silence. My dog barking, a rocking chair, humming from the AC. I hear my heater running, elevator ring, my kettle whistling, silence, and the creek behind me, purifier humming. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask you to attune to your sense of smell. What are you smelling? I'm smelling markers. Someone else's, coffee, carnations, coffee in my breath. Indian spices from what's cooking. Santal fragrance that I'm wearing. Candle burning. Wow, my mind is going everywhere. Thank you. Now attune to your sense of taste. What are you tasting? Sometimes what we smell kind of affects our taste. Someone says no odors. Someone's still smelling flowers. What are you tasting? I had some lemony drink earlier, and I'm tasting some of that lemon still. Ooh, someone else is tasting chocolate, ice mocha, tea, raspberry tea, leftover taste from lunch. Drank some chai tea. Beautiful. 2 more. Green tea, granola bar, and last night's gumbo. Last one. Grapefruit, bubbly water. Okay. Woo. That's a lot. Last sense. What are you feeling? What are you touching? And you might consider maybe jewelry. I'm noticing my weight in my chair. Okay, that's what I'm touching. Holding my baby, a soft blanket, bracelets. Thank you. Couple more. Comforter over me, rubbing my hands together. That's beautiful. And my dead skin on my cuticles. I feel like I want to go over there and give you a mani. So, but thank you. So again, people, laughter can help us to release endorphins, dopamine. So now check yourself. Are you feeling a little more grounded? Right? So tuning into your senses mindfully can help you to ground. And I love this activity because we were talking about senses. So you could maybe use this activity of feeling grounded before you go on a visit, maybe before you go to work, maybe while you're driving, but mind, don't close your eyes, right? Especially if you're in traffic, could be grounded if we're thinking about, And then imagine maybe the first time I tried this activity, I was supervising a hotline. So I was over the phone with someone that I couldn't see. And the parent was having a really hard time. And so we did this activity and she felt a little bit better. So can you imagine maybe using this activity to help maybe a client feel grounded? And then imagine if they're saying this activity out loud, maybe with their child. I could give them some ideas of how to tune into their senses when they might need it. Okay. Any thoughts about that? I see people are stretching my at a top. I don't know what that means, but thank you. My at a top G-I-G-I-J. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So I hope you feel a little bit more grounded. So let's move forward if that's okay. And I don't know if people wrote any comments, so please, if Catherine, please let me know if I'm missing any comments. So let's talk about child development. And just want to start by asking you, how do you see children? So another way to think about that question is, what is a child? Okay, what's a child? So write in the chat or say it out loud. A child is love, happiness. Thank you. What else or anything else? What is a child? How do you see children? Joy, curiosity, full of wonder, exploration, energy. Ooh. Yeah. A little person, not fully developed yet. Short person, borrowing from a narrative therapist. View of the world, questions, a sponge, kind of clueless, but in a nice way. Thank you for clarifying. Really curious. So thank you. So just to help us to think that the way we see children really informs our expectations of them, right? They're in the moment. It really helps us to informs our beliefs and what we expect of them, and also informs how they're treated, right? So for example, if we considered a very intelligent, let's say little girl, and said, boy, that little girl acts like an adult in a small body. Well, then that's how we might treat her, like an adult in a small body, instead of a child who might have cognitive development, maybe superior cognitive development, but still growing. That is not an adult. That's a developing child, right? And so keeping that in mind, that sometimes when we, like our children are so savvy, right? If I got a new cell phone and I gave it to my boys, I'm floundering with it, right? So you might think, aha, see, they're so mature, maybe in that aspect, but they're still growing. Or children that are big, right? Big, maybe big physically for their age, we might think, oh, they're strong enough, they don't need a car seat, but they're still developing, right? Just because they're big doesn't mean they're fully developed. So keeping in mind how we perceive children, what our definition sets up what we expect from them, okay, and how they're treated. So let's take a look at culture. Okay. So in thinking about influences of culture, so culture influences all aspects of human development, and it's reflected in parenting beliefs and practices. There is nothing in the way that we care for babies and toddlers that is not cultural, right? It's the lens that I want to invite you to keep today as we talk about child development, right? So we're going to be talking about aspects of development that research shows, but also taking into account that there will be variations based on culture. So this quote says, or excerpt, although overall parenting goals are similar or remarkably similar across cultures, the process by which parents in different cultures, contexts, seek to achieve these goals may differ. So we might have some universal needs, desires for our children, but the cultural context shows, highlights differences. So that could affect different expectations that parents may have for in various cultural groups, and different, that could affect different expectations in the different stages of development. Okay, so keep that in mind. So thinking about cultural influences, right? So what are aspects of culture, right? Values, beliefs, language, traditions, societal organizations, customs, maybe coming from a specific region. And that can affect how we parent, right? So what expectations according to age? So maybe thinking about geographical expectations, if maybe children grow up in a rural area versus urban, so maybe they might have more freedom, right? In a rural area, maybe they might, thinking about down the line, they might drive sooner, right? As compared to urban environment where there might be more constrictions because there's so many people, there's more dangers. So there's might be different expectations according to their age, just based on geographical location. How about eating habits, mealtime behavior? So maybe, I know I grew up with, you better finish everything on your plate, right? So again, that might be a cultural stance coming from that, we don't want to waste food, right? Especially coming from island living, right? There, we don't want to waste food. I don't think anybody wants to waste food, but eat everything on your plate. Or let's say someone, grandparents feel that, feeding a 4-year-old by mouth is something that they might hold according to their culture. Or even sleeping habits, sleeping together or alone, right? That reminds me of my grandmother. She had a huge bed, must have been like a queen size bed and a twin bed pushed together. And I remember we all used to have fun, like watching TV shows, playing cards together, and we would all fall asleep and stay on the bed and have room. So it was my grandmother, my mom, me, my brother, 2 dogs, and a cat on a bed. And we all slept together, fell asleep, and it was all right. So it affects sleeping habits. That was our family culture. How about health habits and medical care? So thinking about how you grew up. So I grew up with a lot of herbal medicine, right? So there was a lot of mistrust of going to a doctor. Only in the extreme case would you go to the doctor. So a lot of herbal medications is something that that we used. Or also maybe thinking about a family that maybe not letting their child crawl on the ground. Maybe they think the floor might be too dirty, not giving a child floor time. I know for us, don't step over a child was a cultural kind of twist, because it wasn't good for the child's health. If you think about it, you might fall on the child. Discipline. Children, I see, spend so much time in quality childcare that their culture differs from parental influences alone. Yeah. So again, thinking about the overarching culture and then how that affects home culture, right? How that might be in balance or maybe at odds. So thank you. So discipline, how children are taught, social norms, thinking about parent-child communication. Maybe children should be seen and not heard, right? Or displays of affection toward children. So I know, again, growing up for us, it was everybody has to get a hug and kiss, extended family visits, and boy, when they come and when they leave, right? So a lot of affection toward family members, and thinking about the role of children in the family. So what are chores like? What are expectations? Can children make decisions or not? Or are children the ones that do the dirty work? And thinking about attachment, reattaching to a nuclear family, extended family, dressing, grooming, hair care, right? I know for us, it was, I couldn't really do my own hair until I was a tween, right? So not really having that experience until I was older. And then gender roles, identity, and expectations that might affect your family and might kind of be in balance or at odds with an outside culture. So that makes me think about one time we went to church and my son was playing with a doll. And this gentleman, I think he was a father, he can't play with dolls. I was like, well, why not? I want him to be a good father one day. He has to practice. So again, we walk around with our culture, and that can influence how we interact. So just to raise awareness. Okay. So keeping in mind that we're in an overarching culture, but we do pick excerpts for our own family culture, but we're always influenced by maybe a past culture, maybe our parents' culture that molds our family's views and perspectives, right? So sometimes, especially dealing with immigrant families like myself, I always heard where it was like 1 foot here and 1 foot back home. I was like, well, aren't we home? Right. So there was that pull. And then also there's overarching culture, but people pick and choose what they might want in their family culture. So for example, Thanksgiving dinner was something that my family did not experience. We didn't have Thanksgiving dinner. We did Christmas dinner, even though it was part of an overarching culture. Or different parts of the culture that your immediate family, again, holds true. So again, within culture, there's parts that people pick for their extended family or immediate family. So keeping that in mind. Someone said, especially the first generation, those who were born in another country, the pull of feeling, where do you belong? Yes, that's true. So that 1 foot in here and 1 foot back home. What is back home? So our work with families, right, as providers, is to think about, we bring our culture with us wherever we go. So we see interactions between caregivers and their children from our perspective, filtered by our culture. So raising awareness to how that might affect how we interact with the parents and their children. So bringing awareness to our beliefs, our interpretations, right? Our deep-seated rules, and bringing awareness to maybe question and making sure we're open-minded in honoring the families that we work with. So some questions you might consider: what's important with this family I'm working with? What are their preferences? What are their beliefs? What is my body language saying? Am I being triggered by something, and how can I really reflect on that? How does this family's culture influence their decisions? How do prejudices, possible historical and current trauma, social pressures, inequalities influence their decisions? How does this affect our work together, right? how can I show them that they're the experts of their children? Right? And am I telling them what to do, or how can I ask them? So again, keeping safety in mind, right? Of course, safety is first, but instead of saying, oh, baby should be doing this, maybe asking a family, what do you like to do with your baby? What do you like to do with your child, right? How can I help, if any, if at all? Would you be interested in receiving information about child development? Right, so consider with child development, our job is to listen and ask, learn, right? And facilitate, not assume, decide, right? Not tell them what to do or how to do it. Okay. So thinking about that, are there any examples of maybe how do you keep families that you work with, their culture in mind, or maybe something you'd like to consider? Listening to them, yes. Thank you. Listening, it's sometimes easier said than done, right? So we could hear the words that people say, but listening, maybe inviting active listening, helping someone expand on their story, maybe asking open-ended questions that they could expand and talk about what they are experiencing. Mhm. And maybe being curious and observing, kind of like what I think Diane had mentioned earlier. So someone said, agree. Yes, active listening. Yes, thank you. And yeah, respecting their input. So remember that parents and caregivers are the expert of their children. They're with them 24/7, right? And so they know their child. And so, yes, being cultural humility. Yes, yes, those are what we're talking about, are aspects of cultural humility, not a checklist saying that, oh, I know this culture, right? So having cultural humility and learning and being present with families, asking them what's important to them. That's beautiful. Thank you. So those are all fantastic ways. And that each family has their own culture. So again, we might just on the surface, looking at a family, we might not know the intricacies of their culture. So I love the stance that people were saying, ask, be curious, and listen, right, about what is important to them. Those are beautiful. Thank you. So keeping that in mind, get that cute picture. Oh, someone wrote a lot. One of the most challenging situations for me was working with a mother who identified as Navajo and who's experiencing severe mental illness. I did not know about the mental health diagnosis and observing the mother's reticence to verbalize as possibly due to cultural differences. Yeah. So being aware, being curious, and I like how you're holding a lot, right? So, I know what I know. What else might be going on? So again, keeping that awareness that can help to understand what might be going on and getting a clear picture of the situation. I like that. Thank you. Okay. So in thinking about how do children grow, we had mentioned last week that children grow in 4 basic areas. And although children do grow individually at their own pace, all children go through some identifiable sequence of physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and linguistic changes as they develop, right? So as we mentioned, why even learn about child development? Why talk about child development? So it can help us with our expectations. And so if maybe there is some concerns about the way a child might be developing, we could identify their uniqueness, but also maybe get some support. And if something falls outside of the development expectations, and we can investigate those concerns earlier on. But also as child, thank you for sharing this challenging situation. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I love the support of each other. That's beautiful. So also as children grow, how to stimulate the development of children in your lives and help them through particular stages and different processes. So in thinking about child development, we're going to be talking about developmental milestones, things that most children can do by certain ages, how they play, learn, speak, act, move around, like taking their first step, smiling for the first time, waving goodbye, right? And those are also known as developmental indicators. And then child development refers to, like we talked about last time, the chronological changes in behavior, cognition, physiological development of children as they grow from birth to adolescent to adulthood. Okay. And having the psychosocial developmental lens, we're going to be talking about the first two stages: infancy, newborn to 18 months. And we talked about, I like this particular lens because it talks about a basic conflict that children in these age range goes through and how parents can help. So what's their task? In this case, infancy, the task is trust, and versus mistrust or distrust. And they could come out with a virtue of hope. And then early childhood, ages 2 to 3, autonomy versus shame and doubt, and developing the virtue of will. And we're going to do preschool next time. So in thinking about trust versus mistrust, that's the basic task or conflict. The task of the child is develop attachment, learning to trust. And again, the development of cognitive, emotional, physical, motor, language development. Okay. So let's talk about attachment, and then we will have a little break because it is on the hour. So when we think about attachment, it's an innate instinct that's activated when we are in distress. Okay. So attachment involves it's a biological impulse that tells us to go to our attachment figure when we feel distress. Look at this little girl, right? Holding on to her attachment figure. And think about how that relates to us as adults, right? So if we were in a car accident, for example, maybe the first person you might call is someone, maybe your spouse, maybe your mom or dad or relative. So you will call maybe your attachment figure. I would call my husband. Okay. So it's not that we stop and think, right? We don't decide. It's instinctual when we are in danger. Go to that attachment figure. So in thinking about attachment, It's a specific aspect of the relationship between a child and their caregiver that's involved in making the child safe and secure. So it's a unique emotional connection between a baby and his primary caregiver. A secure attachment is developed from the caregiver's ability to manage their own stress, respond to a baby's cues, and calm them when they are in distress. Right? So primary care caregivers connects to babies and reads and understands signals that the baby exhibits, right? So crying, babbling, mimicking facial expressions, and eventually smiling, laughing, pointing. And it's a process where the baby and their attachment figure learn from each other. So it's not possible to understand everything or always recognize what the baby needs. But even in that disconnect, to repair can allow for secure attachment, right? And a secure attachment is not unidirectional, it's bidirectional, where the caregiver reads the baby's signals and the baby learns to read the caregiver's signals. So for example, I know a friend of mine talked about during an earthquake, right? So earthquake, there's specific instructions of what you're supposed to do during an earthquake, right? Maybe stand in an archway, stay away from windows. But she was recalling that during an earthquake, first she ran to her mom, right? Forgetting all those instructions, and her mom ran to her. So again, it's bi-directional, right? So you run and seek your attachment figure. So the purpose is not necessarily bonding, like playing with a child, feeding, showing boundaries and rules, or to teach a child new skills, right? Those are different. But attachment happens again and again when the parent or caregiver comes when the baby cries and reassures them when they're scared, hungry, cold, and establishing themselves as a safe position. So, and it's a constant and responsive connection to each other. So the caregiver responds when the infant's attachment system is activated. So maybe the child's feeling of safety and security are threatened. Remember last time we talked about how in brain development, part of the brain that is mostly fully developed is the amygdala. And the amygdala is something that helps with survival. So the amygdala is activated when we feel threatened, right? And that amygdala is what's triggered when a child is not feeling safe, feeling secure or threatened. And that is what activates the attachment, that attachment. And again, when the secure attachment, the parent is there to help the child to calm down. And this begins, this could be seen 6 months, right? About 6 months, where the infant comes to anticipate specific responses of their caregiver to their distress periods. Okay. So children might also have different types of attachment to different figures in their family. So again, in my particular case, I was attached, my attachment figure was my mom and my grandmother because of how they meet our needs when we are in distress. So again, thinking about attachment, it's, look at these pictures. So meeting a doctor, right? Dad there with their baby, child crying, and the mom is comforting or relative. Right? And it could be different figures, right? Whoever is there to calm and help a child that's in distress. So secure attachment is determined by the caregiver's response to the baby when his or her feelings of security are threatened, like when they're sick, hurt, upset, or scared, as I mentioned. So again, the importance of a secure attachment, it is a crucial foundation for the quality of a child's overall social, emotional, cognitive, neurological health outcomes. And it's a mold for future relationships. It serves as a basis for all effective relationships in life. It's a mold for human to human bonds. It molds our perception of the world regarding human relationships. And it teaches the baby, right, that we can trust their primary caregiver, and it's okay to communicate feelings to communicate their feelings, and eventually that will expand out to be able to trust other people. So again, something that happens in this stage, a child is trying to figure out, is it okay to let my feelings be known? Is it okay to let my needs be known? And it teaches the baby to trust the primary caregiver, and that can build trust in other relationships. Okay. So let's get back to this point. We talked about trust versus mistrust. So attachment is a foundation to building trust. Okay, so that's that second point. So let's stop for a moment. Talked a lot about attachment, right? So what I'd like you to do is think about, before we take a break, what are maybe 3 points that come to mind when you think about attachment, right? So what stood out to you when you think about attachment? Any words that come to mind, or any points that you heard? Oh, thank you. I didn't see those in the chat. So security, safety, connection, calming a child, warmth, trust, soothing. Thank you. So those are all indicative of attachment, right? Calming in times of distress, okay? And forming a secure attachment, okay? So let's take a break, and maybe a 5-minute break, if that's okay. And during that break, please take a bio time, stretch, and we'll be back at 2:15, if that's all right. So I'm going to add it's safe. Okay. So thank you. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back. All right. Oh, someone wrote yes. Okay. Thank you. I got one yes. All right. So let's continue and look at this first stage. And now let's look at cognitive, emotional, physical, and motor development. So in thinking about the aspects of the growth in those 4 areas. Again, keeping in mind that these are guides or guidelines. And we're going to break down 2 to 6 months, what you might notice, 7 to 12 months, 13 to 18 months, and highlighting some things you might notice. And also remember, you're going to get this PowerPoint at the end. So in case there's something that you want to look at a little bit more closely, that's for you, okay? And so these guidelines, also at the end of the PowerPoint in the resources, you'll find a link to see more details. These are just highlight and summary of what stands out for us that we want to share. So looking at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they recently updated their website and there is tons of information, okay? So let's look at this first stage, infancy, and what we might see some highlights from 2 to 6 months. And I'm going to have my friend here to help illustrate. So what you might see cognitively is starting to observe the caregiver, right? And a fixed gaze for a few seconds, 2 months. Might open their mouth when they see a breast or a bottle. They're hungry, 4 months. Putting objects in their mouth to explore at 6 months. It's a little bit out of proportion. Social emotional development might calm down when they're picked up or spoken to, and might look at faces, right? Happy when the caregiver approaches, that's happy. Smile when the caregiver speaks, or smiles at them at 4 months, laughs at 6 months, makes sounds to grab attention, and recognizes known people at 6 months. Again, these are just some highlights. So physical development, if you think about physical development during this time, the first stage, boy, oh boy, that physical development is amazing. A child that can barely support their head, right? To at the end of 18 months is walking, right? Potentially walking, it's amazing. So 2 to 6 months, start raising their head turning to the voice of the caregiver, can hold toys and move hands to their mouth. If on their stomach, can rise and maybe rest on their arms at 4 months, roll over, face up, can lift half their body at 6 months. Some language, making sounds like coo, cooing, right? Or chirping. Was that okay with you? Yes. Responds with sounds when spoken to at 4 months, takes turns speaking back and forth, bubbles and sounds and sticks out tongue and blows at 6 months. 7 to 12 months, might look for objects when they fall, right? Or can't see them, might hit objects against each other. Again, this might not be very proportionate, but right there. 9 months, can put objects in a container at 9 months. Some social emotional development that you might notice, might be scared around strangers or reacts when caregiver leaves. Recognizes when they're called by name at 9 months. Enjoys watching games like Where's the Baby or Peekaboo. Plays with caregiver games with hands at 12 months. Some physical development highlights, can begin to feed self unaided and unsupported, depending on the food, like maybe Cheerios. And again, clamp, grip, passes objects from one hand to the other at 9 months. babbles, says mama, baba at 9 months, can raise their arms up to be carried, and might say goodbye with a hand, and might call mom or dad at 12 months and might understand the word no. 13 to 18 months might build a tower with a couple of objects. So got some blocks here, right? So might build a tower of 2 small objects at 15 months. Might try to use items correctly, like phone or a cup, and imitates actions. Cup, cup, cup. Social emotionally, shows affection to their caregiver, dolls, right? 15 months, claps hands by clapping, copies other children at their games, and points to show maybe what catches their eye. 18 months, might move away from caregiver, but make sure that they're close by. Again, that attachment. And then might try to help when you're dressing them or washing their hands. And if you're reading a book, right, maybe looks at the pages when they're being read to. Physical development might take a few steps alone, 18 months and walk without support, 15 months and walk without support at 18 months. Might use their fingers to put food in their mouth and try using a spoon. Drinks with a cup without a lid, but might spill sometimes. Doodles and can hop off of a chair, maybe an armchair without assistance, 18 months. Language development, maybe tries to say other words besides mom and dad, like plane, 15 months, and maybe adds more words by 18 months, maybe 3 more words, and can follow simple directions, instructions with demonstrated actions, 15 months, and maybe with no action, 18 months. And points with their hand to ask for something and to get help. Okay. So in thinking about what we talked about with attachment, learning to trust, and also the various stages of development, thinking about some of our tasks that we can do as parents and caregivers. Right. So as we mentioned before, offer stimulation, provide a safe environment for children to explore. And that might mean getting down at their level, maybe crawling and seeing what they see. From where we're standing, we might not notice a paper clip on the ground or something that might hurt them that can be put in their mouth. Also, keeping small items, like I mentioned, maybe having, this is the inside of a paper towel, thinking that whatever can fit inside this paper towel roll, like a paper clip, for example, if it could fit down here, can be a choking hazard. So keeping that in mind. And having the number for poison control maybe on everyone's phone, right? So just in case something's ingested, everyone has the number to get help. Establishing routines and maintaining a schedule can help foster a sense of security, and again, building that trust. And offer calm and consistent care. So that might also take self-care for ourselves, like we talked about, that mindfulness activity, and maybe exploring other ways to take care of ourselves so that we can be in a position to support families and helping them have that consistent care. And being emotionally available to attend to baby's cues. And of course, hold calm right? Hug baby when they're crying and when they're in distress. Okay, any questions about that? Anything to add to that? Okay. If anything comes to mind, let me know. So let's look at the 2-year-old, the second stage, early childhood. So the 2-year-old, right, 18 months to 3 years, so it's kind of a range. And 2-year-olds definitely in the middle, but that's the second stage of life. And that's autonomy versus shame and doubt. So autonomy is developing an identity of who am I? So trying to establish that separate identity and exploring the world around them, learning how things work, and then continue that cognitive, emotional, physical development, language, and learning what the limits of behavior might be. Okay. So in looking at this stage, thinking about that separate identity, when children were younger and with their primary caregiver, it almost seemed like you were one person, right? So you were together. As children began to explore and separate, it's almost like, wait a minute, we're two different people. It's time to explore, right? Who am I? So establishing that separate identity is something that we can see. And so that's where we might see tantrums, right? So children being overwhelmed and frustrated, maybe because what they're exploring can't get it to work. Or we might see other challenging behaviors that because they're learning social norms as they're exploring. So also at this stage, we might hear children say no. And that could be for a couple of reasons. Number one is the beginning of separation and self-affirmation. This is what I want, no. But also thinking about, it might be what children hear a lot. And as they're developing language, if they're hearing no, then they're going to say no. Okay. So we can maybe think about how to redirect and maybe tell children what they can do, right? So for example, yeah, for something that's an emergency, no, right? Not playing with plugs and having a safety cap on the plugs. Please don't mess with those. And let's play with toys instead of playing with outlets, right? So what can they do? And that can increase their vocabulary. So children at this stage explore, right? The world around them. They want to learn about how things work. And they're like little scientists. So if we think about, they need to touch, grab, taste, climb, get into everything in their world. They're going to learn by opening drawers, taking everything out, cabinets, taking everything inside out, playing in toilet water if you allow, if that's not locked, putting things in the toilet, putting someone's toothbrush in their mouth, pressing computer buttons, plugging in everything if they have access, so be careful, and putting things in the trash, doodling whatever they can grab, and climbing to reach things that adults are using because they want to explore what's that about, and also savor what other people are eating, right? So just thinking about that when we see that, that means that they're in that second stage. They're really trying to develop who they are and find out about the world around them. So I want to tell you this poem and see if this resonates with you. And you're going to get a copy of this poem. It's called The Toddler's Creed by Dr. Burton White. And I love this because again, children at this stage are self-centered, right? They're not ready to share. Everything's mine. And that's because they're egocentric. They need to love and discover who they are themselves. And they see the world through their eyes. So for example, my 2-year-old, my 18 to 3-year-old here. So let's say if we cover, she hides under this blanket, right? Because she can't see me, she thinks I can't see her, right? So that's an example of egocentric. Here we are. So let's read this poem and see how this resonates with you. If I want it, it's mine. If I give it to you and change my mind, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If it's mine, it's never going to belong to anyone else, no matter why. And if you're putting something together, all the pieces are mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. But if it breaks or has to be fixed, that's yours. Does that speak to children in this second stage? Okay. So again, thinking about what children might, how we know they're in this stage, right? So again, that absolutely, thank you for the feedback. Absolutely, I love it. So with children in this stage, looking at their development, how it progresses. So 24 to 30 months, we'll see the cognitive development progressing, holding something in one hand while using the other, right? Trying to use toys, handles, and buttons, right? Figuring that out, playing with more than one toy at a time, using imaginary games. So maybe having a toy and putting the baby to bed in an imaginary bed, or trying to maybe feed the baby with a block, pretending that's food. So again, that imagination. Try to solve simple problems like pushing a chair against a shelf to reach something, following two-step directions, and recognizing at least one color. So social emotional development notices when another person is hurt or sad, and maybe looks at their caregiver to see how to react in a new situation. So they might look at you with a sad face, saying that person's sad, or if they fall, looking at you first, how to react. They might play alongside other children and maybe sometimes play with them, and this is all 30 months. Show their caregivers, hey, look at me, this is what I can do. And maybe follow simple routines, like, and help when asked. So, let's let's clear up, time to clean up. Let's put all the blocks in containers if you don't mind, or please. Some physical development, can kick a ball, climb steps without crawling or without assistance, 24 months, eating more and more with a spoon, and use hands to turn things. That's a good, right? Wow. So turn things, unscrew caps, 30 months, can remove some loose clothing of their own, can jump with 2 feet, can turn the pages of a book one by one when read to. And then also language development. Phrase 2 words together, maybe at 24 months, 2-word sentences, including an action. and approximately use 50 words, including pronouns, by 30 months. Recognizes and points to at least 2 body parts upon request. Right, where's your head? Where's your feet? Bing. And uses additional gestures besides waving or pointing, like maybe come over here. And can identify and point to objects in a book at 24 months, right? So where's the chicken? Where's the rooster? Where's the dog? And at 30 months can name them themselves. What is that? Okay. So those are some summary of some things to look for. So again, in thinking about children at this stage, establishing a separate identity, exploring the world around them, continue growth in the 4 areas, and also learning what limits of behavior might be. So this is a task of figure out what the boundaries are, right? Of home, trying to determine what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So we might see that more and more, and that's an indicator that they are growing and developing. So a lot of times people might see that behavior of, if maybe someone says, oh, don't touch that, and the child might, right, so, hey, don't touch that, and they might go toward that and look at you, and they might think, see, they know what they're doing, they're being defiant, right? Something else to keep in mind is sometimes our reactions, right? So let's say they say, please don't touch that, and they touch, we're like, oh, don't touch it, right? And they go toward it, oh my gosh, don't touch it. So it might be our reaction. They might not be trying to be defiant, but like when I try to touch this, you act like that, right? So keeping our, looking at our reactions, if there's behaviors. So maybe keeping our reactions minimal to behaviors we don't want to see repeated, and being excited about behaviors that we want to see repeated, okay? So in thinking about our tasks as parents and caregivers, again, setting boundaries and routines, firm and tender, especially at this age, right? So if they are trying to develop a sense of will and a sense of who they are, right? So trying to be mindful of that balance, because if we come on maybe too strong, then we might have a power struggle. So again, being firm and tender at the same time, especially since children at this stage are developing a strong sense of will. And letting them know what to expect. So for example, before we eat, we wash our hands. So setting boundaries and routines and letting them know what's predictable behavior. Give them the opportunity to choose as much as possible, because sometimes parents might say, when children are adults, okay, you're on your own, you got to make choices. So from age 17 to 18, you're supposed to all of a sudden make choices. So how do you build that up? So giving choices all along, and maybe talking out loud about your choices that you make. So asking them, would you like to wear this skirt today or these pants? They might say, I want those shorts. Well, our choices today are the skirt or the pants, right? So giving them choices and encouraging behavior that we want to see. Again, child-proofing your home as much as possible, lifting away items that can be dangerous, and allowing them to be successful in their exploration. Imagine how we would feel if when we came to our home, our oasis, and someone was following us around saying, don't touch this, don't touch that, right? So putting it away so they can explore. And you can always bring it back down when they're older, right? So people might, again, we put up markers, items that are breakable, maybe little china. Those children are going to explore and maybe have plastic items at their level. And then when they're older, we could bring it back down, right? So keeping that in mind so they can be successful in their exploration without constantly feeling, oh, I can't touch this, I can't do that. And again, providing stimulation and opportunities to explore, and then supporting children and listening to them and helping them name their feelings more and more. Again, that is part of continuing with that secure attachment. And helping them, again, self-regulate, right? Learning to use different aspects of the environment, like you learning to use the toilet is a big milestone at this age. And also there's a YouTube, on YouTube, Alameda County First Five, we did a training last February, actually February 2021, on helping children letting go of diapers. So again, giving them that success in getting control over different aspects like going to the bathroom. Okay. Any questions about first or second stage? Let me see if there's something. So, you know, hearing these different aspects of development, what parents and caregivers can do, oh my goodness, we might feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't do any of that, right? Or, I hope what I did was okay. So just want to let people know to consider, you know, if you didn't do certain aspects before, it's not too late. Remember, children are developing. Their brain is malleable, it's changing. So with new information, we could take responsibility and implement new ideas and try new things, right? It's not too late to start. And parents are doing the best they can with what they know. So again, with new information, you could do different things, right? And that is the indicator of taking responsibility. So let's say, you know, thinking about the attachment process, let's say the attachment process was interrupted, maybe due to illness or maybe some other situations. Keeping in mind that if a child is attached to the caregiver that was taking care of them at that time, there can be more likely to attach to you when you return. So even though interruptions might happen, that attachment to a caregiver at that time can indicate that they can attach to you too. So keeping in mind that sometimes interruptions, or sometimes we might not know, that we can still repair, okay? And then thinking about development indicators. So looking at information, right? Maybe if we realize that there's something that our children aren't doing, or maybe they used to do something within that developmental stage, and maybe they're not doing it now. So keeping in mind to trust your instincts, right? Trust what you might be observing. So early intervention, right? So trusting your guts, your instinct as a caregiver, as someone in a child's life, reviewing some of the guidelines from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention or other organizations, and consult, like we mentioned before, having good counsel, pediatrician, teachers, childcare, other childcare givers, having a good set of counsel to support you. And also, as mentioned before, Help Me Grow. And there's also a handout we have for you, and also the links that we have with other resources. And I encourage you to listen to professionals and don't ignore your own instincts also, trusting your wisdom as parents and caregivers. And then with early intervention, when this is a quote, when children are at risk, tracking their development and making sure they reach developmental milestones can help ensure that problems are caught early and that they can receive interventions needed. So in particular with providers, having that relationship, being a part of that good counsel for caregivers. So not blaming or judging, but building your relationship so that you can be someone that they can rely on if there's something going on that they might question, that you can be part of that team. Okay. So as we're coming to an end, just want us to pause, and you could write or think about what's something that you might have noticed. What's something that the information that we shared today reminds you of? What have you learned? The children I take care of, right? I recognize in my baby or a baby in my life or a toddler, or even something else that comes to mind. And I encourage you to think about it or write it down in the chat or writing notes for yourself, right? Because as information is shared, it's might be new and fresh. So writing down what comes to you, and those prompts can help you think about what to write down. Are there any?
Hi, Chantal. Sorry to
Hi.
interrupt.
Yes.
I have a question. I
Yes.
wasn't here. I didn't see your part one, and I just wonder if you spoke about separation anxiety and stranger anxiety.
No,
and
we
how
didn't really.
we
We didn't
might-
talk about that in particular.
Okay.
But again, that's part of cognitive development, right? So when
Oh,
we
right.
see that, when we see, wow, they're recognizing that's not their primary caregiver, right? That's part of seeing that, okay, my child is developing cognitively, right? So it's stressful, but that's also good news. Like, oh, okay, they're in this stage.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah. So we were taking the stance more of what do you notice? Yeah. Thank you for asking. Right. So in dealing with separation anxiety, so even letting children know, talking about what might happen next, right? So, we're going to go here. We're going to be there in about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to leave, right? And also letting them know what's going to happen ahead of time, right, can be helpful. Even maybe having a picture, right, of you that they can look at and let them know. Sometimes, like in adult time, we say, I'll be back at 3 o'clock. But children don't know that, right? So saying their time. So when you take a nap, wake up, have a snack, then I'll be back, right? So letting them know more and more like their time frame when you'll be back. And then being back, right? So say, yeah, remember I left and it's hard to say goodbye, but I came back after your snack, right? And so again, just an example that could be helpful. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking. And someone wrote, what stood out, setting boundaries are important to be firm and tender. I like that statement. Yeah. So again, if a child's developing a sense of will and we try to And here comes the power struggle, because we want them to have a good sense of will, right? We want them to come through that stage knowing who they are and having a good sense of will. So trying to have that balance. Right? Thank you. Anything else? Okay. So again, let me know. So for this week, just an invitation, just like last time, just keeping in mind of what we talked about this week and what you might notice in the children in your life that might be within that age range. What are you noticing about attachment? What are you noticing about trust? How about their development in that first year? How about how they're trying to establish who they are? Are they exploring everything in sight, right? And how can you keep really interesting, like a toilet, safe, so they don't put everything in the toilet, right? How you could have their environment safe that they can explore, right? Items that aren't going to hurt them. And also watching them grow and develop. What are you noticing about how they're changing and growing? And that is indicative of, wow, they're really developing in those 4 areas. What do you notice? So that's for home practice. And for next time, if you can, join us for session 3. Let me see, I think I have a slide. There we go. So the next training, I'm going to be focusing on preschool stage. And we're also going to talk about temperament. So again, understanding our children's uniqueness and how we could help them. And then also exploring the positive effects of the pandemic on child development. Okay, so the next week is next Friday at 1, the same time, same day of the week. And then someone wrote, you and the team are doing amazing. Blessings for you. Oh, thank you. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for this thoughtful, informative training. Gratitude to you, the group, and their wisdom at First Five. Thank you. It's so wonderful to be part of the team. So look out for some of the handouts. So again, you'll be getting the Toddler's Creed, that poem. You will also be getting from some milestone moments from the CDC. And that also lists that you know your child the best and who to contact in case you have any questions. And it has a cute little trail, child development. And then help me grow. Reading each other's mind, help me grow. That's part of the handouts. There's a phone number that you can call for parent resources and also for provider resources, kind of printed out that page for you to see. Okay. And then keeping in mind too, as we're coming to an end, you get the list of resources, alamedakids.org, Center for Disease and Control. Also Family Paths, you can call hotline, the National Breastfeeding Hotline, Help Me Grow, and there's poison control number, and 0 to 3, as well as a list of all the sources that we used. Okay. So again, within this last 5 minutes, I want to thank everyone for coming. Are there any final questions, comments, or feedback? Someone said, thank you for sharing and kind words. Oh, thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful group. So nice to see everyone. All right, so please keep in mind that you're going to get an evaluation in via email. And for those, have a great weekend. Please take care of yourselves. Take care of the children in your lives, and I'll see everyone next week.